Romans didn't just build soldiers who couldn't get tired. They built a system that manufactured tirelessness for 700 years. Every empire since has tried to copy it. None have succeeded completely.
In the series Learn from the Best, we learn how people go downhill, how businesses go downhill, but we learn from the most successful businesses, entrepreneurs, leaders, and empires as well. And one of them we want to study is the Roman Empire. For something like 800 years, no one could compete with them.
Yet Rome produced soldiers who literally did not experience fatigue like normal humans. Rome had a problem. Their enemies were everywhere, and most of them brought more men to the battlefield. The Gauls alone could throw 300,000 warriors at Roman forces. Rome might show up with half that number, sometimes less. So how do you win when you're outnumbered? You don't quit. Here's what Roman generals figured out pretty quickly. The side with energy left at sundown usually wins. Not the bigger army, not the braver one. The one still standing when everyone else is gasping for air. So every Roman soldier had to perform like 3 men. That's not motivational poster talk. That was the actual math. The question became simple. How do you build soldiers who physically cannot get tired? Well, Rome found the answer. And it started with a training program so brutal that modern special forces would recognize it immediately. 4 months of absolute hell. That's where we're going next. So Rome needed super soldiers. Great. But you can't just wish that into existence. Here's what most ancient armies did. They handed a guy a spear, showed him which end was pointy, and shoved him toward the enemy. Training complete. Good luck. Rome, 4 months minimum before you even smelled a battlefield. 4 months sounds reasonable today. Back then, it was insane. Wars didn't wait. Enemies didn't schedule appointments. But Romans calculated that one properly trained soldier was worth 5 untrained ones. The math worked. Now, what did those 4 months actually look like? Dawn meant running, not jogging, running. Then weapons drill until your arms scream for mercy. And when the sun started dropping, construction work, digging trenches, building walls, because apparently just being exhausted wasn't enough. The guys running this torture program were called campidoctores. Fancy title for men legally allowed to beat you with sticks if you slacked off. Roman military physicians actually tracked recruit fitness. They documented that soldiers completing training had resting heart rates 20% lower than when they arrived. They were measuring cardiovascular adaptation 2,000 years before we had a name for it. The 4-month duration wasn't arbitrary either. Romans tested different lengths. Shorter training produced soldiers who broke. Longer training wasted resources. 4 months was the sweet spot for rewiring a wheat farmer's body into something that could march all day and fight all night. Failure meant shame, not freedom. But completing boot camp was just the beginning. Because next came the marches. 18 miles. That's how far Roman soldiers marched 3 times a week during training. And they didn't stroll. They covered that distance in 5 hours flat. That's a pace most people today can't maintain for 2 miles. Now, why 20 miles specifically? The Romans figured this out through trial and error. Shorter marches didn't trigger enough adaptation. Longer marches caused injuries that pulled soldiers out of training for weeks. 20 miles hit the sweet spot. The body does something fascinating under this kind of stress. It grows additional capillaries in the leg muscles. More capillaries mean more oxygen delivery. More oxygen means muscles that refuse to quit. But regular training marches were just the baseline. When battles required speed, legions executed forced marches of 30-plus miles, and they sustained this pace for days straight. Julius Caesar's troops once covered 100 miles in 3 days to surprise Vercingetorix in Gaul. They arrived ready to fight, not ready to rest, ready to fight. The Gauls expected a week's warning. They got 3 days and a fully operational Roman army at their gates. Legs like that don't happen by accident. They're built through thousands of miles of repetitive punishment. Here's where Roman training gets genuinely clever. Training swords weighed twice as much as real ones, not by accident, by design. The wooden practice sword that recruits swung at posts all day long, deliberately heavier than the steel blade they'd carry into battle. Seems backwards, right? But think about it. You spend 4 months swinging a 6-pound wooden sword. Your arms burn, your shoulders scream, you want to quit every single session. Then someone hands you a 3-pound real gladius, and suddenly you feel like you could swing it forever. That's the trick. Modern sports scientists have a fancy name for this. They call it overload training. Recruits practiced against wooden posts called a palace, 1,000 strikes per session, every day. That's not a typo, 1,000. Your arm would fall off just thinking about it. I tried hitting a punching bag 100 times once. My shoulder hurt for 3 days. These guys did 10 times that, daily, for months. And the result? A soldier who trained with heavy equipment could swing a real sword for hours without his arm dropping. Fresh recruits, you could spot them instantly during extended drills. Their sword arms started sagging after 20 minutes. Veterans would actually watch for this. The wobbling arm, the slowing strikes, dead giveaway. But heavy weapons only work if soldiers have the stamina to keep fighting. And building that kind of endurance required something most armies would consider insane. Here's where Roman training stops making sense to normal people. After marching 20 miles with 80 pounds of gear, most armies would collapse into sleep. Romans, they grabbed shovels. Every single night, without exception, Roman legions built a fully fortified camp. We're talking a 3-foot trench surrounding the entire perimeter, wooden walls on top, guard towers, organized streets inside, the whole thing. Even if they'd march out at sunrise and never return. This nightly construction burned roughly 800 extra calories per soldier. That's after the march, and it took about 3 hours to complete. Here's what the Romans figured out that nobody else understood. This wasn't punishment, it was the ultimate work capacity builder. See, modern trainers have a term called work capacity. It means how much total physical output your body can handle before shutting down. And there's only one way to increase it. You do more work. The nightly fort building created soldiers who could perform ridiculous amounts of physical labor without their bodies crying for help. They became machines.